The attitudes we normals have towards a person with a stigma and the actions we take in regard to him are well known. Since these responses are what benevolent social action is designed to soften and ameliorate. By definition, of course, we believe that the person with a stigma is not quite human. On this assumption, we exercise varieties of discrimination through which we effectively, if often unthinkingly, reduce his life chances. We construct a stigma theory, an ideology to explain his inferiority and account for the danger he represents, sometimes rationalising an animosity based on other differences, such as those of social class. Yeah, some of the language. We use specific stigma terms such as cripple, bastard, moron in our daily discourse as a source of metaphor and imagery, typically without giving thought to the original meaning. We tend to impute a wide range of imperfections on the basis of the original one, and at the same time to impute some desirable but undesired attributes, often of a supernatural cast, such as a sixth sense or understanding. This is a quote from Experiments in Survival. For some, there may be a hesitancy about touching or steering the blind, while for others, the perceived failure to see may be generalised into a gestalt of a disability, so that the individual shouts at the blind as if they were deaf or attempts to lift them as if they were crippled. Those confronting the blind may have a whole range of belief that is anchored in the stereotype. For instance, they may think they are subject to unique judgment, assuming the blind individual draws on special channels of information unavailable to others. Further, we may perceive his defensive response to a situation as a direct expression of his defect, and then see both the defect and response as just retribution for something he or his parents or his tribe did, and hence justification of the way we treat him. Now, turn from the normal to the person he is normal against. It seems generally true that members of a social category may strongly support a standard of judgment that they and others agree but does not directly apply to them. Thus it is that a businessman may demand womanly behaviour from females or aesthetic behaviour from monks, and not construe himself as someone who ought to realise either of these types of conduct. The distinction is between realising a norm and merely supporting it. The issue of stigma does not arise here, but only where there is some expectation on all sides that those in a given category should not only support a particular norm, but also realise it. Also, it seems possible for an individual to fail to live up to what we effectively demand of him, and yet be relatively untouched by his failure. Insulated by his alienation, protected by identity beliefs of his own, he feels that he is a fully fledged normal human being, and that we are the ones who are not quite human. He bears a stigma, but does not seem to be impressed or repentant about doing so. This possibility is celebrated in exemplary tales about Mennonites, gypsies, shameless scoundrels, and very Orthodox Jews. In America, at the present, however, there are separate systems of honour seem to be on the decline. The stigmatised individual tends to hold the same beliefs about identity that we do. This is a pivotal fact. His deepest feelings about what he is may be a sense of being a normal person, a human being like anyone else, a person therefore who deserves a fair chance and a fair break. Actually, however phrased, he bases his claims not on what he thinks is due everyone, but only of every one of a selected social category into which he unquestionably fits. For example, anyone of his age, sex, profession, and so forth. Yet he may perceive, usually quite correctly, that whatever others profess, they do not really accept him, and are not ready to make contact with him on equal grounds. Furthermore, the standards that he has incorporated from the wider society equip him to be intimately alive to what others see as his failing, inevitably causing him, if only for moments, to agree that he does indeed fall short of what he really ought to be. Shame becomes a central possibility, arising from the individual's perception of his own arising from the individual's perception of one of his own attributes as being a defiling thing to possess, and one he can readily see himself as not possessing. The immediate presence of normals is likely to reinforce this split between self-demands and self, but in fact, self-hate and self-derogation can also occur when only he and a mirror are about. This is a criminal's view of his non-acceptance. Parker Allen. When I got up at last, when I'd learned to walk, sorry, this is not, I'm sorry, I have the wrong reference here, my apologies. When I got up at last, I had learned to walk again. One day, I took a hand glass and went to the long mirror to look at myself. And I went alone. I didn't want anyone to know how I felt when I saw myself for the first time. There was no noise, no outcry. I didn't scream with rage when I saw myself, I just felt numb. That person in the mirror couldn't be me. I felt inside like a healthy, ordinary, lucky person. Oh, not like the one in the mirror. Yet when I turned my face to the mirror, they were my own eyes looking back, hot with shame. When I did not cry or make any sound, it became impossible that I should speak of it to anyone. And the confusion and the panic of my discovery were locked inside me then and there, to be faced alone for a very long time to come. Over and over, I forgot what I had seen in the mirror. I could not penetrate into the interior of my mind and become an integral part of me. It could not, sorry. I felt as if it had nothing to do with me. It was only a disguise, but it was not the kind of disguise which is put on voluntarily by the person who wears it, and which is intended to confuse other people as to one's identity. My disguise had been put on me without my consent or knowledge, like the ones in fairy tales. And it was I myself who was confused by it as to my own identity. I looked in the mirror and was horror-struck because I did not recognise myself. In the place where I was standing, with that persistent romantic elation in me, as if I were a favoured, fortunate person to whom everything was possible, I saw a stranger, a little pitiable, hideous figure with a face that became, as I stared at it, painful and blushing with shame. It was only a disguise, but it was on me for life. It was there for real. Every one of these encounters was like a blow to the head. They left me dazed and dumb and senseless every time, until slowly and stubbornly my robust, persistent illusion of well-being and of personal beauty spread through all of me again, and I forgot the irrelevant reality and all that was unprepared and vulnerable again. The central feature of this stigmatized individual's situation in life can now be stated. It's a question of what is often, vaguely, called acceptance. Those who have dealings with them fail to accord him the respect and regard with which the uncontaminated aspects of social identity have led them to anticipate extending, have led him to anticipate receiving. He echoes this denial by finding that some of his own attributes warrant it. How does a stigmatized person respond to the situation? In some cases, it would be possible for him to make a direct attempt to correct what he sees as the objective basis of his feeling, as when a physically deformed person undergoes plastic surgery, a blind person treatment on illiterate remedial education, or a homosexual person psychotherapy, in an attempt to achieve normal status. But a transformation of self from someone with a particular blemish into someone with a record of having corrected a particular blemish, here proneness to victimization, is to be cited, a result of the stigmatized person's exposure to fraudulent servers selling speech correctors or homosexual correcting psychotherapy, skin lighteners, body stretchers, youth restorers, as in rejuvenation through fertilizer treatment, cures through faith, poise, and education. Whether practical technique or fraud is involved, that quest, often secret, that results often provides a special indication of the extremes to which the stigmatized will be willing to go. And that's the painfulness of the situation that leads them to these extremes. One illustration may be cited. Miss Peck, a pioneer, New York social worker for the hard of hearing, said in the early days of the quacks and the get-rich-quick medicine men who bounded, saw the League for the hard of hearing as their happy hunting ground, ideal for promotion of magnetic head caps, miraculous vibrating machines, artificial eardrums, blowers, inhalers, massagers, magic oils, balsams, and other guaranteed surefire positive permanent cure-alls for incurable deafness. Advertisements for such hokum until the 1920s, when the American Medical Association moved in with an investigation campaign, beset the hard of hearing in the pages of the daily press, even in reputable magazines. The stigmatized individual can also attempt to correct a situation indirectly by devoting much private effort to the mastery of areas of activity ordinarily felt to be closed on incidental and physical grounds to one with history crumbing. This is illustrated by the lame person who learns or relearns to swim, play, ride, play tennis, or fly an aeroplane, the blind person who becomes an expert at skiing or mountain climbing. Tortured learning may be associated, of course, with the tortured performance of what is learned, as when an individual confined to a wheelchair manages to take the dance floor with a girl in some kind of mimicry of dancing. Finally, the person with the shameful differentness can break from what is called reality and obstinately attempt to employ an unconventional interpretation of the character of a social identity. The stigmatized individual is likely to use a stigma for secondary gains as an excuse for ill success that has come his way for other reasons. This is from Journal of American Association, Facial Disfigurement and Personality. For years, the scar, hair lip, or misshapen nose has been looked on as a handicap, and its importance in the social and emotional adjustment is unconsciously all embracing. It's the hook on which the patient has hung all inadequacies, all dissatisfactions, all procrastinations, and all unpleasant duties of social life. And he has come to depend on it not only as a reasonable escape from competition, but as a protection from social responsibility. When one removes this factor by surgical repair, the patient is often cast adrift from the more or less acceptable emotional protection it is offered, and soon he finds, to his surprise and discomfort, that life is not all smooth sailing, even for those with unblemished, ordinary faces. He is unprepared to cope with the situation without the support of a handicap, and he may turn to the less simple but popular protection of the behavioural patterns of the neurasthenia, hysterical conversion, hypochondriasis, I cannot say that word, hypochondriasis, or the acute anxiety states. He may also see the trials he suffered as a blessing in disguise, especially because of what it is felt that suffering can teach one about life and people. This is from Heinrich and Kriegel. But now far away in the hospital experience, I can evaluate what I have learned. A mother permanently disabled by polio writes, "For I wasn't only suffering, I was also learning through suffering, and I know my awareness of people had deepened and increased, and those who are close to me can count on me to turn all my mind and heart and attention to their problems. I could not have learned that dashing over a tennis court. Correspondingly, he can come to reassess the limitations of normals, as someone multiple sclerosis wrote. Multiple sclerotic, wrote.